So, to my left is a poem called Autumn by Amy Lowell, and to my right we've got a painting called Americana by an artist named Charles Sheeler. But we're not quite ready for Sheeler yet, so we're gonna put that aside for now.
Autumn goes like so. They brought me a quilled yellow dahlia, opulent, flaunting, round gold flung out of a pale green stalk. Round, ripe gold of maturity, meticulously frilled and flaming, a fireball of proclamation. Fecundity decked in staring yellow for all the world to see. They brought a quilled yellow dahlia to me who am barren. Shall I send it to you, you who have taken with you all I once possessed?
So, at a surface level reading, Lowell begins Autumn by describing a nice yellow flower before addressing the reader head on, accusing them of taking everything from her. But let's dig a little bit deeper. For starters, the flower isn't just a flower. Instead, it's this really interesting fertility metaphor. On line 9, Lowell describes the flower as fecundity, draped in staring yellow. It can't get much more explicit than that. She's literally describing the flower as extremely fertile, and that is kind of what flowers do. That's their shtick, you know? But it's not just there. The flower is also described as being the gold, quote, of maturity, and with the line breaks putting of maturity on its own line, the poem is very clear that maturity is being emphasized. The flower has abandoned the innocence of its, quote, pale green stalk, and it's really eager to do so. But Lowell does more than just connect the flower to fertility. She also connects herself to the flower, and by extension, herself to fertility. She's personifying the flower through her use of, quote, opulent and, quote, flaunting, and which are both very human qualities for a flower to possess. Then, as we transition into the second part of the poem, it becomes more clear. Lowell's narrator muses about sending it to you, the reader, and she also establishes that you, the reader, have taken, quote, all she once possessed. So the flower is possessed by her, but it's also an extension of her. By considering giving it to the person who has, quote, all of her, the flower becomes the only part of her that she still controls. It's the last part of her. Moving on to Sheeler now, let's start with the background. In the top left-hand corner, we have a dresser. It has a very curved bottom. To its right, the red chair is made up of a semicircle surrounded by dowels, and in the upper right-hand corner, you guessed it, curves. The couch also contains cushions, and the cushions and curves lend it a very organic and domestic feel. They genuinely look comfortable, and that makes them, and really the whole background, attractive. But then we've got the foreground, and while it shares the same reds and yellows as the background, it still stands out for a couple of reasons. In contrast to the organicness of the background, this foreground is all harsh and angular. And while the chair in the bottom left-hand corner is technically in the foreground, it doesn't feel like it. Instead, our eyes focus on the yellow table in the middle of the painting. We've got this game of backgammon, an empty dish, and a blank piece of paper. None of these really provide any respite from the barren tabletop, and really just manifest a sense of hopelessness. While the blank paper would normally signify new beginnings, there's nothing to create with. The dish is empty and the game is unfinished, and the whole background feels alien and inaccessible because of this. And it's that general unattainability that saturates these two pieces. Lowell's tone results from her rejection of the romanticism of the first half, and Sheeler doesn't manage much better. He too establishes the more flowing, romanticized standard, and then rejects it. The table looks off because it's askew from the rest of the painting. It's imposed itself on the painting to prevent us from going to that better place. Both Lowell and Sheeler establish Romanticism only to reject it, and they're both affected by it. The barrenness of Autumn's final third is less defined by some grand uniting principle, and much more simply an opposition to the first two-thirds. It's defined by what it is not, rather than what it is. Sheeler does the same. The table doesn't cast a shadow, doesn't stand for something grand. Instead, it exists in opposition to the romantic elements of the painting. Rather than arguing for anything, these pieces present a nihilistic view, defined by their exclusions rather than their inclusions.
So thank you for watching, and I leave you with this picture of a banana duct taped to a wall.